Welcome to Ali Fitness Podcast, a weekly production all about bringing health into fitness. A self-funded professional cyclist, 53-year-old, going on 30, I might add, Marg Fedyna is not only an amazing road cyclist travelling the world to compete, but also she dabbles in and has outstanding achievements in mountain biking, cyclocross, Nordic skiing and adventure racing. From a non-athletic family, Marg became a runner at about the age of 16 and was very competitive in 800 and 1500 metre races. Due to an injury, she had to quit running and so started serious road cycling in 1994 when she joined a club. Although she did admit that Nordic skiing and riding a bicycle had always been part of her life in Canada. Continuing as a professional road cyclist, she also got into adventure racing from 1998 to 2003, which led to endurance mountain bike racing in 2003. Perhaps the best way to paint the picture for how amazingly good she is to give you a few highlights and stats. So she was winner at the 2014 Taiwan KOM Challenge. She was first at the 2013 to 2014 Holtwood Pyrenees, which is an amazing event, the 2006 Ruta Mountain Bike Champion, the 2005 World Solo 24-Hour Mountain Bike Champion, the first person to win in solo at the Sea to Summit adventure races from 98 all the way to 2004, and first in the Lake Louise to Banff 71-kilometre Nordic Ski Race. And I believe that was in 2004, 6, 9, 2011 and 2016. So absolutely amazing results. Marg, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So I don't know where to start, but I guess you had some amazing achievements throughout your career, and I'm sure we're going to see some more. I guess my first question is, there was a big break there from, say, 2007 to maybe 2013, where it looks like you didn't do that much, although I'm just going from stats. Can you tell us what happened during that time? Did you get ill, or was there a period of physical or emotional issues? Can you sort of let us know what happened during that time?
Gosh, in 2007, I had a lot of race plans and literally just went from racing top-notch high-end to completely low-end, just drained immediately. Still functioned in some races. This happened during a team event, Trans-Alp mountain bike, like day 5 into the race. It's just like, could barely finish, but did, and then came back to my teammate and I. We ended up winning many days of that event and placed 3rd on the podium. But once I came home, I was messed up. And as an athlete, we always think, oh, it's just, a cold or strep throat. I'll get over it. Still had more races to do. But I knew I wasn't feeling well, or something was different and didn't know what. But still competitive, still stubborn. Went to a few more events because there was an opportunity to race in Pakistan. But finally, just the symptoms took over, and I managed to see a doc while I was at an event in the U.S., and I was diagnosed with adrenal drain. So it's kind of like mitochondria burnout, like a battery being full charge to just zero. That's basically what happened. But as an athlete, again, I followed the doctor's protocol, which was a lot of supplements to boost back everything I was missing nutrient-wise. And he advised these vitamin C IV drips. But everything was kind of like Band-Aid treatment. It was months. It was 3 months. I was at a point where I wasn't even able to do anything physically. So that's tough emotionally. It's like much like having an injury, but worse, to the extent I couldn't do anything. Like, even I remember trying to go to a yoga class, and an hour and a half is normal, but by half an hour I needed out. So just to let you know the level of strain, it was too much to do half an hour of yoga.
And so at this stage, 3 months in, did you have any idea what it was?
Got back to the doc. Still, why was I not healing? Again, at that point, 3 months in, it was the first time in my life, like, I've been through injuries throughout my athletic time. There was always something else I could do or whatever. But this time, it was the first time I ever lost hope that I'd ever heal. And heal in the sense I wasn't even capable to get through a day of daily life without losing that battery charge. So at some point I came to an acceptance. It was really weird of that's just how it would be. But meanwhile, I pursue different things, as in I tried everything and anything, as in tried a bunch of meditation, certain types from someone called Adam Dream Healer, which definitely really helped me at the time. Reading, learning more about nutrition and a lot of things. So I think a good thing happened at some point. A naturopath challenged me. He said he wanted me to be on a liquid diet of 600 calories a day for 2 weeks minimum and try for 4. So being an athlete, I had to go for the 4, knowing that would be tough. So it wasn't until 1 year later, once I'm on my way to healing, I had to look back. And I believe that time, which was at about December of that 2007, 3 months later of crashing, that I believe just giving the digestive system a rest, as well as getting into colonic, just trying one out. The combination of something like that was the start to healing. And the healing was so slow. I wouldn't have known it was happening, but eventually I realized I was getting better and better. Yeah. So it was really tough times.
Wow. And I mean, it sounds like you suffered a bit of depression during that time as well. Is that?
Depression's interesting because, yes, but at some point when I had lost the hope of healing, I came to terms with it, as in there was no healing. My passion to be active is gone. And I was asked by a friend, how do you feel today? And I sincerely answered, I really don't feel like being here. So it's to that extent. And learning now that I seemed okay with it then, but now I've learned that is part of being in the kind of illness I was, that there's self-acceptance of what's going on, and a comment like that would happen.
So did you ever get a diagnosis of what it actually was, or can you guess what it was?
I think it was a mix of a whole bunch of things, because meanwhile, while I had that adrenal drain diagnosis, I then went to Pakistan for a race. There was much sickness going on with diarrhea or whatever we caught from possibly drinking the water. Probably brought home some parasites that I had to deal with that issue for a while. There were a bunch of symptoms I had that a lot of people, professional medics, could not diagnose. The symptoms a lot was weird temperature, high temperature feeling when my temperature was actually okay, and this jittery feeling throughout my whole nervous system when I woke up in the morning that no one could explain to me what was going on.
So what was the physical ramification of that? Were you shaking, or?
Inside, it felt like I was shaking, but externally, no, I wasn't. And it was a horrible feeling. It was just like a huge vibration going on in my body.
And you mentioned colonics. Did you start trying colonics, and did you continue with that? What?
I started with my first one then when I was on that liquid diet. It wasn't the most pleasant experience, the first one, just because it was new to me. But you know what? The technicians are amazing. It is a neat experience. Now I'm a total believer of them. I just go sporadically every so often.
Wow. And so how long did it take for you to say, yeah, I'm 100%, I really am feeling?
So interesting. Okay, so by a year later, I still, I went back to training a bit, and I was fearful that if I pushed too hard, I might crumble. So the first event I ever really tried after that 1 year was I went to a Tour Transalp. It was a road bike, new event in Austria, 7 days, fall time, 2008. And I just said to myself, whatever happens, you can do whatever. Take it easy. If, do whatever I would normally do to challenge myself to go hard, but back off need be. Eating, I had what to eat, be careful. At that time, I was dabbling a bit more with more plant-based and less meat. I also said to myself that whatever I desired, just go for it. And everything seemed pretty good. I was surprised actually how well I endured 7 days in a row at that time, just because I was on a recovery mode.
And then say from 2008 to say 2013, when you started winning races again, was it just a slow progression to get back to where you were? Or because obviously you're in your peak when all this happened.
Yeah, when it all happened, I was about 42 in 2007. And I was even shocked at myself, how each year I felt I was getting stronger and stronger. And I believe it was consistency that I was just training in California every spring and had a race plan set up for the summer, and then I'd work in the fall and the winter. Just did that year after year, and I forgot the question.
That's right. So I guess what I was wondering was that from 2007 to all the way to 2013, you didn't sort of seem to be performing as well as you were when, at the peak in 2007. Did it really take a long time to get back to it?
Okay, so I mentioned that first bit. Yeah, I was consistent. And then when I returned, I came back from my illness, but I still, in my mind, I never believed I was back to the level I left at. And that grated on me. So I went in local events, and I probably fought harder in the event than normal because I had the belief I wasn't as fit as I had been. So I actually maybe tried harder. For a couple years there, I had that feeling of not being back where I was, and I missed it. So I just dabbled. And then I also had questions like, who am I now? What do I do? It has been years since I left full-time employment and just went contract work, just enough to make money to support myself in racing, that I was still doing the same thing. I was just off on a 6-month contract, and it was like, well, now what do I do? I'm so used to the lifestyle. So I still did the same thing. I went down to California in the spring, and I dabbled in a few events. So I'd still do some pretty good events, but just wasn't fully there. Then I think someone told me about another fellow cyclist from my club about the very first Oats Route event, which was happening 2011, and said, knew I loved climbing. And this race was 7 days of 20,000 meters of elevation gain. And I was pretty eager to give it a shot. So it was only 2 weeks ahead of time I committed to going. Really, I probably hadn't put in enough mileage and all that. I was working in Edmonton. It was pretty flat there. But I went, and to my surprise, it was just a great event. It was just so nice. It was almost like it was a great event for a person who's competitive, who used to race at, say, an elite level, but can come back and still have that fun with the competitiveness in something like an Oat Route race. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's great. So that sounds like the trigger to get you back in. So I'd love to talk to you more about your training. And I say that with inverted commas because it seems that you seldom train, but rather you just ride with little care about watts and numbers and heart rates. And it's more about just feeling and the love of it. Can you share with us a little about what a training week might look like?
I can do things on my own, alone rides if need be, but really I need to ride with people to get faster. And so wherever I am, I'll look for groups to train with, and that we'll do some speeder rides, and I just hang in there, and I get that kind of almost interval training because of it. And I just pick and choose, and then I know in between the week when to take a rest day and when I might just want to do more of an elevation ride. I can do that on my own. But I so welcome training with people. I love seeing my elevation gain on my Garmin, but things like watts, I still don't really understand it. And heart rate, I used to wear a heart rate monitor, but it just got uncomfortable. And I know by feel what my heart rate is. I know when that's too high. I can tell. I can definitely tell that. I just go by a feel.
Wow. That's sort of refreshing to see in this day and age. And obviously you also go by feel when it's time to recover. You just sort of feel that it's time to recover.
I laugh because of the workplace cycle I had. It was kind of 6 months on and off. There's times I had, there was a month before I knew I was leaving off for a trip to California, and I had to finalize so much with work and this and that. For that month, I was probably, I say, couch potato. I didn't have time to fit in the training, had to get the work done. And then I'd go off on to a training session. I would have all that rest, but then I'd easily put in 6 weeks of effort and get back into a good fitness regime. I think I've just trained myself into being a sporadic, take tons of rest and then train hard kind of thing. And it works for me.
And so you can easily just have 6 months off and not feel like you need to exercise?
Oh, no. Not 6 months. Generally, I was doing my work period in the winter. So at home in Canada, we have snow. So it's a given. Living in a snow country, must do a snow sport. So for me, that was Nordic skiing. And recently, last couple of years, I picked up ski mountaineer racing.
Right. So it doesn't sound like you're having that much time off.
It is and it isn't. Just it's not to the level of the cycling training in the summer because it's colder out, won't train as many days in the week, definitely. So it's a lesser amount of training hours.
Wow. So you live an amazing life, playing basically, spending time with people who have all become your family by the looks of it. Doing what you love, cycling, and then in the winter you mentioned skiing. Do you ever get bouts of depression? I wonder because at the end of a season or at the end of an event or a great overseas training trip, do you ever go from that real high to the real low? And how do you deal with that?
Oh, I admit I've had my little bouts of depression after. Actually, I didn't understand it. But when I look back, there were times after a season that I would get into this little dark, gloomy cloud. But it would shake off. And then I did notice it happened to go away one fall time when I went from my season and then started to just, I played around, went into an adventure race, which then threw me into the ski season pretty much right away. There was really no time in between. And just thought I just floated through that season. There's interesting. After an incredible event, say even the 7-day events, it's so much excitement to be with like-minded people for a week. And then to leave that, it's a bit of a downer. Probably also due to the fact I spend a lot of time alone. I'm independent and it's just such a treat to be around all those people.
But interesting, when you went straight into the adventure racing, you didn't sort of get that same low. And I remember offline, you mentioned an adventure race that you did in, I think it was 1999, and a reporter was digging in, asking you questions. And I guess they were trying to get an answer like from you that said something like, after I finish this race, I'll know that everything's achievable. But I remember you saying that that wasn't how you actually felt. In actual fact, you knew that you could achieve this. And it was more about having fun and testing how well you could do it. Tell us a bit more about that.
It is funny because the reporter was actually kind of angry with me. And it was like, I was just like, that's my answer, is to have fun. But yeah, seriously, I already knew I could do the event. Like, sure, it sounds extreme. It hadn't done anything like it before. But I had the belief that I could do it. It was just, it was more how well we'd be able to do it. It was a team event, so anything can happen amongst 4 people.
Interesting. So also in that year, you said that you were invited to a university. You were talking about nutrition, and as were other athletes, and giving advice about how you used nutrition to benefit you. I remember you saying you were stumped when someone asked you about rather an off-topic question along the lines of, how are you personally motivated? Why do you do it? And why do you keep going back to the same race you've already won? And I must admit, I also wondered the same thing. You've won the KOM in 2014 and since been back twice. So why?
Yes, I was stumped because I was there to talk about my nutrition with adventure racing, and then I get that question. And I was like, because I can do it. And I didn't realize that the question was coming from the other person's perspective. Yeah, what keeps me personally motivated to do it? One, I can do it and I want to do it. Sometimes I describe it to people. It's like a border collie. Why do they want to keep running and chasing something? It's like they just do it. So similar. And why did I want to come back to KOM? Definitely, it was an unexpected surprise. I thought I would do well, but things worked in my favor and I won that race. 2015 came in second. It was awesome. And now equal prize money won. That is an intrigue. I mean, to help support funding me continuing on, that's an intrigue. Also, something like KOM is very unique. It is the toughest hill climb race I've ever done. I'm a petite person, so I have a very high strength to body mass ratio. Hill climbing is just natural for me with honed effort, but KOM definitely is the toughest hill climb I've ever done, and that's versus doing cols or hill climbs in Europe and just in some of my other races. So coming back to it, even after doing it in 2014, it was rainy, so it was more of a survival race that year. So I definitely wanted to come back the next year to see the scenery, and that was the truth. No one believed that when I said that. They asked me, do you came back to win? And I guess that is true. I would like that, but I did want to see the scenery, which I did that year. why would I come back again? Or why did I even come back this year? This year, 2017, it was same. I wanted to do well. For some reason, things weren't on my side. Had a niggly little something health-wise, a little nagging at me. And then heat and humidity got to me early on. So I crumbled and had cramping. But even in the race when that was happening, I had to change my goal in the race. It was like so strongly. I still wanted to finish. So I would have stopped and just stood on the side with cramps for half an hour till they subsided. I'd do anything just to finish. So that's what my race was like this year. And I'm keen to come back. I had that thought, even with some great cramps. I felt physically strong. And it's one of those races that is just a challenge. And every person has to figure it out themselves, how they can best get up that climb. It's very unique in that it's the last 8K that starts at 2,500 meters, where it's the biggest challenge to finish. The rest of it is like a normal road race, really. So that's the intrigue. And
I liked how you said too, those type of races, it's a game.
Yeah, it's everybody's individual game. When I go in the event, this year they had a very high caliber women's field, but none of that really mattered to me. To me, it's still my race. It's my individual race. What am I going to do? So, yeah.
I like it. And talking about what you're going to do, I remember in an interview when you're about 40, you said you'll just keep cycling at a competitive level until you can. Did you have an age in mind back then? Because I'm sure your answer is still going to be the same. You'll just keep cycling until you can. And I guess I wonder, do you have an age in mind now? Because I don't think you're ever going to stop.
I remember back when I was 40, a fellow worker asked me, "You're 40-ish, and how long will you continue this for?" And I just said, until I can. And I have a hard time myself comprehending my age, and it's 53. And I don't feel 53 because I train with such a wide range and age ability of people. I feel like I'm just one of them. I'm also at this thing, yes, physically I'm aging. I know that. That's a fact. And so even this year, I'm like, should I go to KOM or not? I was like humming and hawing. It wasn't until a couple months prior, I was like, yes, I'm going for sure. And then it's like, okay, I'm not getting any younger. I don't know what's going to happen next year. Just go now and enjoy and do your best. And then I thought, well, I'm going to be out there all that distance. Why not find some other race around it as well? So next week, I'm off to China for Grand Fondo Yunnan. It's a new event. I'm not too concerned on how well I do or anything. I'm just really looking forward to the experience. I'd like to do my best. For one, it's at a higher elevation. There's a lot of riders. Might be a lot more flatland riding than hill climbing. There'll be some hill climbing, but it'll be at 8,000 feet going higher. How long will I keep going? Right now, the answer is the same. You're right. Until I can. It's just part of a life for me to be active and to be competitive. That is part of it, though, the competitiveness.
Yeah. And I wonder too, as you were riding and maybe even today, do you have people that inspired you?
That's been a tough question for me whenever I've heard it. I wished I could just answer and pick one person, but it wasn't like that. There's been the odd person that intrigued me while I was interested in something. When I was young, I had this intrigue to be a runner. So, I mean, there wasn't much information. We didn't have internet back then. So it was whoever I could hear or find information about. But mountain biking, I remember Alison Sidor when Jacko was like 1995, 1996, more so because she was up and coming and Canadian and she had won world champs. And also there were some prominent women cycle racers that were writing in Pedal magazine, which is a Canadian magazine, and they wrote about their experiences. So just things like that intrigued me, but no one in particular person. I can say that I only started really mountain bike racing when I hit age 30. That's an older age to jump in. And I had been a runner at an elite level. So I had fitness. I didn't have technical ability for mountain biking, and I didn't have any knowledge on what to do in a peloton, all that kind of thing. So it was a big learning curve, yet I had the fitness. So being with the club helped a lot, but it was a learning curve the first few years. So I was jumping into these high-end races and just learning as I was going. There were a couple women, just because they were older than me, say there was Leslie Tomlinson from Canada, and she was in her 40s racing. I was admired that. And then, there's been Jeannie Longo, who's been racing since she was a teenager. I just definitely admired the fact she was in the sport for that long, regardless of whatever was in her past. Just a tough question.
And I think, obviously, you're going to be an inspiration to a lot of people and already are, me included. So I've got to ask you about I guess it's a choice. Why did you choose to be a self-funded pro?
I admit I gave it a shot to look for sponsorship. I must admit, when I was slowly building into being a stronger athlete over the years, I probably still didn't respect the fact of how strong I was. So I didn't have the confidence to really promote myself. I think now I might be able to do it a little better. But I remember attempting, and there was really no funding financially, but I was offered the odd products and welcomed that. But it was just difficult. I found the time I spent doing the searches, and it was just easier to go on and make my own money. So I was fortunate to have been able to get contract work over time. And then even still, there were times it was difficult to get contract work. I just became more improvisational and found odds and ends of jobs to do. Yeah, so sponsorship definitely welcome, but funding's just really not there, especially for women athletes.
And do you think that's changed in the recent times?
I believe so. It sounds like it, but at a higher end. There's funding coming from certain resources. I like to support products I believe in, so it's very difficult. Those products I believe in, such as more plant-based products, they have a trouble themselves just keeping above water with funding. So it's a hard one.
You mentioned plant-based products there. I've got to ask you, maybe not even advice about nutrition because everyone's different, but what's your philosophy around nutrition, cycling, and maybe on and off the bike?
That was a slow builder. I grew up as a meat and potato eater and always had been up until when I had my health issues. And then I just slowly read more and more. I realized just the negative effects a lot of our environment had on food and alternative sources I could then get. And I slowly put more plants into my diet. I never meant to stop eating meat, for example. And I just found that as I put more in, it just naturally happened that I dropped meat products. Then I became more of a believer of just animals aren't necessary for protein. There's enough availability through plants. Yeah, I could probably go on and on with a lot of plant-based nutrition.
But you sound like a big advocate.
Very.
Okay, and what about on the bike? Say you're doing a long distance, hilly or flat, whatever, even a stage race. What does your nutrition look like on the bike?
To some people, it doesn't look like enough, but I rely on dates, and if I can get my hands on it, fresh figs, sometimes any fresh fruit if it's available at feed zones. Definitely instant hydration, little bit of boost. But dates, simple. I'm at the point right now, I admit, to attempting to eat more while racing. I think I actually trained my body into getting used to not eating enough.
And what about sports drinks or gels or anything like that?
Again, I went through what everyone went through, did everything sport drink wise, was very into the common ones, then was a big Vega follower for a while, ambassador, support for them. And then I stuck to water a little bit more and made sure there was an electrolyte in there. And sport drinks, I'm not too keen on. I'd be keen on just the coconut water. Yeah.
Excellent. And I guess before I finish talking to you about nutrition, I've got to ask you, what is that green thing that you're drinking?
Geez, most people see me with a green drink, and it can be either a green juice that I made that day, and that would be of mostly green leaves and cucumber, celery, just really high vegetable. I would juice almost every day if I wasn't traveling. But if I am traveling, I'll make sure and do this at home as well. I'll mix my own green powder drink, which is very high in protein. And back when I was using bought protein powders, I realized the main ingredient was usually a brown rice protein or something big like that before. And then the other products in there were little. little portions. So I was going bigger on those other portions and making my own. So some of the green powders, for example, would be chlorella, spirulina, maca, ashwagandha. I'll read about a certain herb and what its properties are and then give it a shot. So my drink, I pretty much have one of those as my recovery drink or a early morning drink.
So you make them yourself as to avoid the filler that they're using?
Yeah, definitely avoid the filler. I don't see a need for that. Or I'll source a specific protein powder, either a pea protein or hemp protein. And it's funny, there's the odd friend that's asked me to mix my powder for them. So I doubt I'll ever get into a business with it, but I enjoy mixing what I do. But getting back to actually learning what is in a protein powder drink that is bought, this goes back to when I was racing a lot and before I crumbled with my health issues. At that time, I was a believer I needed more calories. So I was drinking a product called Ensure or Boost, and it was number one ingredient after water is high fructose corn syrup. And then I also read that the amount of vitamin that they put in is kind of equivalent to a Fred Flintstone. So, and I was drinking 3 of those a day when I was racing, say a 7-8 day stage race, 1 in the morning, 1 post race, and 1 in the evening. And I really do believe my body totally was having a hard time with that, not knowing that I was hurting myself.
And so when was that? Was that before you got sick?
That was before I got sick. And drinking 3 of those a day was 1,000 extra calories, and I wasn't gaining weight or losing weight. And also eating. I was eating a breakfast and a dinner for the event. And yeah, it's kind of scary. I do believe that stuff really is not good.
Do you think that may have contributed to getting sick
definitely,
as well?
Definitely. I can't pinpoint it or anything, but
Sure.
And when I look back.
So apart from your green juice then, let's call it that, it looks amazing. Is there anything else that you make yourself, like your little concoction?
Always have concoctions to the extent that before an event and after event, I'm walking around with a little bag and it's got my green drink in there. It's got prepped food. Most times I find after an event that some of the food that's offered is just not the best, like to have immediately after for recovery. So I make sure I have all that. And so I know a lot of my friends usually ask, what do you have in your mystery bag today? So they're always curious because I have either a jar of water mixed with chia seeds or just different things.
So what would your pre-drink and your post-drink look like if you were to make it yourself?
I just mix them up a little different. I haven't really defined it yet. Yeah, but I do put a few more maybe amino acid things in for the post drink, like a glutamine. And I found a plant-based one, which is interesting. So I definitely still try to seek plant-based in whatever I can.
Okay. And I noticed also that you've been drinking some mushroom-looking.
Okay. So that's another one. Back when I was sick, naturopath wanted me off all acidic things. And so he suggested even vitamin C, don't touch ascorbic acid. So that's when I first learned about camu camu berry and acerola cherry berry, which are berries crushed and are high in vitamin C. You have to take more than you would than ascorbic acid, but you can eat as much as you want and it won't hurt you, because it's a food. So you can gain your vitamin C that way. And then along with it, I learned about just mushroom powders and how they mix well with the vitamin C. That's my little concoction. I'll have it at a different time, just as an immunity booster. So the variety of mushrooms, there's quite a few out there.
Is there a particular variety that you go for, or?
Well, Reishi's high, cordyceps is popular, is helpful. There's just so many, so I'll mix and match, just mix, get a little bit of each. And some have different properties. I just haven't learned enough of which I need when. So once I do, I can probably top things up for that certain thing.
Sounds like you just go a lot with intuition, what your body feels like having, and obviously what's important to you is making natural ingredients and making it yourself.
Definitely. And I grew to become like that. Like I wasn't like that in the beginning, and a lot of understanding now. I really want to know what I'm making.
And I'm assuming it takes a lot of time, but it's worth the effort.
It does, but it is part of it. I do enjoy it.
Interesting. And I guess I'm intrigued to find out a bit more about what you said with you got sick and then it was almost like you mentally weren't ready for competing because you just didn't think you had what you had before you got sick. And I wondered, does it come down to physical versus mental? Have you ever experienced such physical pain throughout a race or something where you had to just absolutely power through mentally to get through?
I would say my strength as well as my weakness is my perseverance. So perseverance gets me through a lot of physical and mental pain, but because of it, my perseverance will push me through while I am in pain and all that. So yeah, it's funny. The most incredible event I've ever done of everything I've done was an adventure race that was a solo event in New Zealand. It was 28 days long from the tip of the South Island to the tip of the North Island, point to point, and 28 days in a row. And it was incredible because even looking at it on paper, I didn't think it was physically possible. And going through it, it was one of those events where it was incredible to experience that, like, even after day 3, I thought, oh, well, I'm going to start feeling sluggish. But by day 5, I found this incredible boost of energy after doing a normal adventure race day. It was a stage race, so there was sleep at night. It could have been a paddle, a mountain bike, a road bike, a run. It just depended on what day it was. It was point to point. Each day was different. And then I remember that by day 5, I was wowed. Like, it's like I thought I was going to be crumbling, yet each day I had renewed energy. But over time, the event took its toll. It was the most incredible experience because emotionally, highs and lows happened. It could have been a good day, a bad day, but had to continue on the next day. There was one day we had an extreme day. It was like a 50K run. I've never done a 50K run, but I remember that one. It was a struggle to finish, but could, because we had to continue on the next day. The toughest part of that adventure race, I remember, was a paddle that we had to do from Coromandel Island into Auckland. But earlier that day, we had done a paddle to an island. Our boats were transported around the island. We ran across to the boats, got in our boats, and then had to paddle in. What happened meanwhile, the first paddle, it was great. It was fine. The waters were great. But the second paddle, high winds came up and the current and tide, everything was against us. Yet as athletes in the environment, I had no idea why it was taking forever to get to paddle, and realized I don't think any of us really knew that we were in some very high current. And with a paddle stroke, I didn't even move. Like, it was like paddle, 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 not moving. It just took forever. It was twice as long as it should have been. There's supposed to be a 3-hour paddle, I think 6 hours later, but the whole day was way too long. So we struggled in, and I just remember how I felt at the end of that day. Not all the racers did the paddle. That's what was hard as well. Because we were stagger started, there was a judgment call to stop half the paddlers to start the second paddle, and they were ferried across. And I remember seeing that ferry cross. Yeah, I remember seeing it cross, and I was like, and I didn't realize there were racers on there with their boats. And so it was just coming in so fatigued. I remember how sore. I just was one of those where the arms were going to fall off at the shoulders. It's like it was too much, but continued on and on and on. And
but why did you continue on? What was it that just made you go?
Well, at that point, there was really no alternative that I could see. Like, I didn't know how I wasn't not going to finish. I had to get in. I didn't really see a rescue boat around or anything. Like, I didn't even think of that. It was just, you have to keep going, have to keep going, have to get in.
Was it partly too, you didn't want to let the team down?
No, it's not a team. It's a solo race.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So
yeah,
no, just, I didn't see a way out, but I didn't even think of that as an option. I compared it as, I can't even describe how tough that was, but it was my toughest just to continue mentally. Because I remember looking to the side to land, and I could see a tree, and how I was barely inching closer, like past it. Like, it was like, wow, with each paddle stroke, not knowing that it was the current that was pushing us back and we couldn't get out of it. But did finish a day. It was just hard because half the races were fresh, half of us were dead. And the word is just dead. And the organizer decided, I think he just took out that section and didn't put it in the results. Well, great, but you have half racers fresh, half dead. And the next morning, it was noticeable. We started with the paddle, and you could tell it was definitely noticeable of who who those paddlers were. We were all at the back together and just dragging along. But things continue. That was one of the tougher moments. And the whole event was amazing because, we perked up, and just to finish that event with all those people, I remember how incredible it was. Like I said, I'm pretty competitive, but on the last day, the 28th day of racing, somebody made the comment, we're heading up to Cape Reinga, which is a lighthouse on the north end of the island. That's where our finish point was. We had started at the lighthouse at the south end. On that last day, someone suggested, hey, let's just hang out in a group today and go at the pace of the slowest racer. So only about not so many of us agreed to do that. There's still those very competitive people. So they went off. And I remember doing that. We hung out the pace of the slowest person. And it was just so cool to finish with a group of people on the last day after 28 days. So
that sounds like an amazing event. So given all your experience, adventure racing, cyclocross, your main sport, which is road cycling, what advice, if any, would you give to someone, maybe one of our listeners who is sort of considering elite cycling or elite adventure racing? Is there anything, and whether it be nutrition, whether it be anything at all, any advice that you give?
Just thinking for myself, definitely got to love doing what I'm doing because I funded it. Success or failure, it doesn't matter. It was the fact of participating and just wanting to be there and do it. And so I think back, there wasn't a time where I had to do something. It was like I wanted to do something. So a person just needs to make sure they're doing things for the correct purpose.
And then I bring that back to sponsorship too. Maybe it was good that you didn't have a sponsor, because I wonder whether that gave you the freedom.
Actually, that was a bit stubborn. I'm very one-track minded, and there's certain sponsors I did focus on solely, and I could have went with others that would have sponsored me, likely in some format. But yeah, it is because I want to support what I wish. So yeah, I'm stubborn. I'd rather do.
But maybe that gave you the more freedom. So that's
for sure. I definitely jumped all over the place with, jumping back and forth from road, mountain bike, adventure racing. Yeah, so didn't have a real strong focus in any direction, but was always keeping fit and ready to be able to do anything, anytime.
Awesome. Well, we're going to watch your races, and best of luck in China, of course. And I'm looking forward to watching you win the next KOM and everything else. And I dare say you'll never stop. I guess, the final question for you, Marg. We ask a question to all our guests on the show. And that is, do you have a tattoo?
You do ask that. Oh, my goodness. I do. And I do because back when I was a runner, it was like a running family. And the guys so much wanted a tattoo, and they were excited about getting a spike, a running spike with a wing on it on the shoulder blade. So you could see it with the singlet while wearing a singlet. The first guy that had one done, I don't know, the shoe ended up looking like a basketball high top running shoe. And I was like, I don't want to get that. So I had to think. I chose a tattoo. I thought about it. I thought, whatever I choose now, how would I feel about it if I got it 10 years ago? What would I think about it today? And that's when I knew I found what I wanted to put on. And it's just a teeny little thing above my right ankle. It's a cyclist. It's the stick cyclist in motion. And it really doesn't mean cycling. To me, it means freedom. And ever since I was a kid, jumping on the bike in the neighborhood was a freedom to me, just to escape and explore.
Wow. And now you just live that life every day. How awesome. Thank you, Marg. Thanks for sharing that. And thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Ellie. Thanks for your great questions and thoughts.
For all the resources and show notes from today's episode, please go to www.ali.fitness. If you liked today's episode, please show your appreciation by going to iTunes, give us a 5-star review and subscribe.